Fernandez. It's a fairly well-known fact in the industry that within the industry that testing with miso paste was an idea that TOTO originated. And in fact, I told Fernando yesterday, I remember being in a TOTO lab in Japan in the late 1990s, and I will never forget seeing these very earnest Japanese lab workers in their white coats, hand shaping different sizes and shapes of miso for the flush tests. It was quite remarkable. John, how did this test go from being used as an internal test to becoming an industry-wide specification?
Well, I won't forget that either, actually, Bob. I remember my first trip to Japan and seeing the guys in the white lab coats as well. And 15 years later, I'm still here, so that's a good sign. Actually, my organization has always felt a commitment to the consumer, strong commitment to the consumer, and also a commitment to industry to try and raise the bar. And in the last 15 years, we've seen everyone trying to stratify toilets with different types of media. In pioneering this media and all variations thereof, in 2002, more or less, I got a call from John Koeller, and he was telling me that his counterpart up in Canada was working on some toilet testing. And this came about shortly after NHB had done some of their testing, which really didn't gain a whole lot of traction. It was based on sponges and paper balls, and we were already testing to that as an industry for the CSA standard to get certified up in Canada. And there wasn't any way to correlate that data to how well the real world scenario flushing toilets would perform. So we hosted John and Bill at our headquarters, and we were trading ideas. And Bill was on the cusp of a very good discovery, and that is thinking out of the box. I think our industry has always been married to tradition. And one of the constraints we've always had with test media is it's got to be repeatable, reusable, amongst a few factors. And I remember Bill had another food substance, and we were kind of comparing the two. But I think the beauty of the miso and the purity of it is that, quite frankly, the characteristics resemble that of real-world scenario. And I think that was anyone with some common sense will probably take grasp of that and say, well, yeah, I think that's the right way to do it. And what better way to test how well a toilet's going to perform than testing it to something that simulates the real-world scenario. And that was the kind of how it transitioned over from internal to kind of industry-wide.
I have to ask you this, and maybe this is a question for Bill and John later, but I've since seen miso that's encased in plastic sheeting. Does that perform the same as without the plastic on it?
Up to certain loading levels, I think there are consistencies between cased and uncased media, no doubt about it. When you start getting to higher amounts of loading, maybe 500 grams or more, you do see some differences. And actually, the beauty of the MAP testing specification was the fact that it served as the perfect gateway to developing the WaterSense specification. And what we did with the WaterSense specification, quite frankly, is we insisted it cannot be cased. So that added a new element in that the soybean media would actually, it dilutes a little bit when it's in contact with water. And it adds a little bit of a density change to it. And I remember back in the old days when the market shift occurred from 3.5 to 1.6 gallons, we'd go to some parties that were interested in retrofitting, and we'd take a 3.5 gallon toilet and just simply dissolve 50 grams of soybean in there, and the products couldn't generate a siphon. You'd flush, and you'd just see the water swirl around, take a good 30 seconds, and the siphon would die. So that's the beauty of having it uncased, is it adds another element of reality to it. So that's the key difference there.
And if I could ask you, Fernando, the same question I asked Rob and CJ, if you could make one change to the current MAP approach for comparatively ranking toilets for commercial applications, or any application really, what would you change?
That's a good question, and quite frankly, I think at this table we're all leaders, and we also have a commitment to the consumer as well. And we got to tell the right story, and we shouldn't let the test reports that we see in the MAP testing be misconstrued. Yes, there's some people that want to see 1,000 grams, and that's fine and dandy, as long as you don't have trade-offs for other aspects of performance, rim wash, water exchange, floating media. And if you can control those parameters, more power to you. But quite frankly, in basing our actions on good science moving forward, we need to communicate the fundamental reasons why we were started at 250 with the MAP and then moved it up to 350, and that's because we based it on a medical study, a British medical study, as far as comparatively ranking stool sizes. So there is some substance to it as to why we took that direction. And I think it'd be good to see a cap on it, quite frankly, at 500. And if manufacturers wanted to keep proliferating higher scores, they can do that on their own. But I think we have to be diligent and serve the consumer first and foremost. When we talk about 1,000 grams, it's way up there, and as long as it's not a trade-off on other aspects of performance, then that's acceptable. But it's with less water being used, it's harder and harder to come by. So we really need to take a balanced approach to product design and development, and you see that in any industry. Automotive industry, quite frankly, it's not just about 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds. It's ride and handling, braking, fuel efficiency, emissions, safety. So we got to take all these things into consideration. If you're a tennis player, it's not how good your serve is. Can you volley? Can you run to the baseline? Forehand, backhand. So we got to take a very balanced and practical approach to using this media. Again, we pioneered it. We know the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is just that. It's good. It's a great media to use. The bad is, things can get a little out of hand and misconstrued. And the ugly is, we got to remember, it's a food substance. So we're actually wasting food, and that's another quotient to that that a lot of people kind of don't realize. Even though it is a food substance, it goes under the radar, and we're kind of wasting food. And miso soup, soybean-based paste, that's, it's a staple of at least Japanese diet, but it's a food substance nonetheless.
What is done with it? It just disposed of when the tests are done?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Fernando.